Hey everyone, I am Taylor Monahan. I'm the founder and CEO of MyCrypto, and today we are going to talk about why good intentions aren't always enough. This is a pretty, random talk. It's going to be fun, but it's a bit more broad than some of my other talks, and less, specific about any one thing within the crypto space. I think that the things that we're going to talk about do apply to crypto. I see them a ton in this space and in this industry, but they definitely exist everywhere. So yeah, let's dive in. All right. So just as a bit of a preface to what we're going to be talking about, when we talk about intentions, or before we talk about intentions, we want to talk about sort of the nuance within words. And so, especially online, and especially on online conversations on Twitter, that can be very polarizing. A lot of times, we sort of use words, and they all kind of mean the same thing, but they don't actually mean the same thing. And a good example of this is if you call someone stupid versus ignorant versus naive. But in reality, someone who is naive is very different than ignorant, in my opinion. Someone who is naive is, given a little bit of leeway with their, actions or the consequences of their actions, because it's assumed that they haven't had the experience necessary in the world to experience things. And maybe it's like no fault of their own, where ignorance tends to be more like you probably should have known that, but you didn't. Still, it's like this lack of knowledge, lack of information. And then stupidity is on the other end of the spectrum, where it's like, it's very insulting. And it's more than a lack of knowledge. It's willfully and deliberately, and perhaps, the accuser, the person saying that you're stupid, often perceives them as like attacking, or like beyond just not having knowledge, but using that knowledge to maybe spread disinformation and other things. And the reason that I talk about this is because in order to get to intentions and good intentions and how this space is evolving, when we talk about people who are naive, we talk about like young people usually, and this space is full of young people. And we talk about, I think there's a very direct link between being naive and being ideal or optimistic, or being full of optimism or full of idealism, and building things with those traits in mind. And obviously having a really idealistic outlook on life is a good, or it can be a good thing. It can be beneficial, but it can also be harmful. So that's what we're going to dive into first, is basically sort of like how idealism can be good and bad. And you want to have like sort of the perfect balance of idealism in order for the best chance of success. And this is my daughter, and it's like literally the best, right? Having a little toddler around, everything is like new. She knows nothing. She's experienced nothing. This is a photo of her that, like, there's a little tiny itty bitty spider that crawled out of this flower, and like then it moved, and she just lost it. Like I hope you can see in this photo, like that is pure unadulterated joy. It's amazing. And as she experiences new things, and as she is corrupted by the world, it's a good thing, because just like this, seeing this spider creates pure joy in her. Climbing on the kitchen island also creates joy in her. And reaching for a hot pan also creates joy in her. Like, she doesn't have any fear. She doesn't have any knowledge that things can harm her. And so she's going to have to learn all of these things. And that's part of growing up. It's part of being a human, and it's part of being a productive member of society as you transition from being like a teenager to a young adult to an adult to like the old wise man, which is hopefully what we all aspire to be. And obviously a 21-month-old is not building products in the DeFi space or in the ETH space or in the crypto space at all. However, there are times where her lack of knowledge and how naive she is about how the world works, I see it like in adults and people who are running companies. And that's the topic that kind of scares me, right? Like, that's where we get a little bit iffy. And a really sort of tangible example of this, that it's not super recent anymore, but it was back in November, is the whole incident between Virgil and North Korea. And I know Virgil, a lot of people know Virgil. He is at his core a good person. At his core, he wants good things out of this world. However, he made some choices in regards to North Korea and South Korea, and allegedly trying to set up a crypto transaction between the two nations, and that landed him in trouble. And when the news broke, a lot of the reactions were kind of like confusion, especially if you know Virgil, because it's so, you would expect that an action like that would come from someone who is stupid or ignorant or naive or one of those words, right? Like, how can you do something that leads to this outcome and not foresee it? And the more knowledge you have about North Korea, the more appalled you were by his actions. And in the same vein, the less knowledge you had about Virgil, the less assumptions or the less experiences that you had with Virgil on a personal level or professional level, the more appalled you were. And the real conflict happened for those who both have knowledge about the atrocities that happened in North Korea and knowledge about how good of a person Virgil is. And while this is just one example in this space, it's a perfect example of how idealism and ignorance and naivete and all of those things can leave us blind to the outcomes of our actions. And, you know, we say 20/20 hindsight, and it's true, but, you know, a lot of the outcomes of the things that we do, they can be foreseen, right? And that the lack of foresight is a lot of times what differentiates being called naive and being called stupid, right? Like, you should have had that foresight, but you didn't, versus nobody could have possibly seen this coming. So that is sort of idealism as a benefit and idealism as a harm, and we'll tie back into that. But the other one that's super interesting to talk about is constraints. So I originally went to film school, and for me, constraints are like a necessary part of anything that you create. Now, back in the day, that creation was like film and television. But now, like, a lot of the things I learned in that industry carry over very well to creating like technology products, whether that's like a user-facing product or infrastructure or a new network. It really is all the same. You have a ton of people coming together, trying to create something, trying to have a positive impact on the world around you, trying to make people's lives better in whatever way you can. And so in film, you have the crazy visionary director. And around this director, you have a whole team of people. You have people like the producer who works really closely with the director. But you also have like just minions who, you know, may not ever actually get one-on-one time with the director. They're making coffee and carrying the coffee and handling the food and like whatever. But they all have this goal of bringing the director's vision to life. And what's really interesting is that some of the best movies and some of the best directors out there are often the ones that have really, really, really great producers and or really great editors. And what makes the relationship between like a director and a producer or a director and an editor, what allows that their creation to be so brilliant is that the relationship between the two people is remarkable. The producer or the editor manages to constrain the director enough so that his vision actually comes to life and actually happens. The film doesn't get gratuitous. The film is not 8 hours long. The film is not some self-indulgent mess. But at the same time, they don't overburden the director with like a lot of the details. They don't overburden the director with, they try to unburden the director as much as possible so the director can really just be focused on like creating and letting that creativity shine. And so even though like basically every single role of every single person on a set making a movie, every single person has a completely different role, but their goal is all the same. Like they all want this movie to come to life. And the same thing is the case with tech products or any products, like anytime you're creating anything at all. And the reason I bring this up is that usually when you're creating, money is a huge influencer on what you can and can't create. Money is the constraining factor. Resources are the constraining factor. However, one of the interesting things, especially about, you know, a lot of the products in the ETH space, is that money isn't really a constraint. If you had an ICO in 2017, especially early 2017, you watched your treasury grow practically unlimited, right? You raised a lot of money and then it grew maybe 2x, maybe 5x, maybe 10x. That's crazy. That's like a lack of constraint. And whenever you have a lack of constraint, things tend to get a bit overindulgent. You're also not forced to be creative in your problem solving as much or as quickly. So maybe you spend a couple of years and you can do whatever you want and there's no concern for money. And then all of a sudden you wake up one morning and it's like a reality check. And that can be, if a team has bad intentions and just like takes the money and run, that's one problem. We saw that. We're pretty much past it, but like it does happen. But this is like a deeper issue. This is like a well-intentioned team who wants to change the world and wants to make the world a better place, not being able to do so because they got carried away, because they were blind to something, because they're naive, because they're ignorant. Like that's the question that I'm kind of talking about and exploring in this presentation. Like I don't have a solid answer for you, but you know, there are definitely times where constraints are a benefit rather than, you know, what we commonly see as, oh, we ran out of money, oh, we ran out of time, oh, we ran out of this, and that results in the failure. Like you have to have there has to be a cap on your limits. And interestingly, we actually saw this exact same thing play out with Kickstarter prior to ICO madness, like 2012, 2013, 2014, where Kickstarter got super hot. You had retail style investors throwing money at projects. You have projects that were trying to raise maybe 200K that suddenly raised like 2 million. There's a great example of a game called Unsung Story, I think. I hope. And their Kickstarter goal was like $125,000 and they ended up raising $2.3 million. And what ended up happening was sorry, I think I got these mixed up. It's either the Unsung Story game or this drone thing. I don't know which one. It's the same exact story with different people and different products. It's also the same story as a lot of ICOs. Anyways, regardless of what the name of the product was, they had a goal. They overshot their goal by like more than 10x. And then they were like, oh, we have all this money. We can do whatever we want. Let's add this feature. Let's add that feature. Let's hire this person. Let's hire that person. And what ended up happening was like the thing never got delivered because they were running around unconstrained. And then they ran out of money. And that is something that we will start seeing with ICOs at some point, like now or soonish. And that sucks. Like it just sucks. It sucks to have a well-intentioned team who not only has the good intentions, but also has the, like they don't have constraints like money or resources, but that's actually their downfall, right? Like it's a bad situation. And to sort of circle this all back around, we can sort of downplay, like we can say like, oh, you had good intentions, that's cool, but also like, you had like millions of dollars, so screw you. But regardless of like what situation you're in and how much money you raised or what opportunities have been provided to you, decisions are hard. And especially like when it comes to business and things that you're truly passionate about, making decisions are really, really, really hard. At the forefront, they're hard because we don't know everything. So back to the whole stupidity, ignorance, and being naive, like that whole subject. In this world, there are things that we know that we don't know, and there's things that we don't know that we don't know. And it's the latter, it's the we don't know that we don't know them. Those are the ones that like come out of left field and hit you upside the face and just screw you over. And these are the ones that are unfortunately, in theory, preventable. These are the ones where Virgil didn't know that, or didn't realize, or didn't understand, or didn't grok that this action could have this outcome. But everyone else on the internet is like, I could have told you that, right? And it's a combination of, you know, other people having knowledge, is like having knowledge that you didn't, like actually having that knowledge, and actually they wouldn't have made the same decision you did. But it's also like 20/20 hindsight, and it's also like it's very easy to criticize. It's very easy to point out what people did wrong. It's a lot harder to do things right in the moment. And this, like the younger you are, the less experience you have, the more unknown unknowns there are. And you can mitigate some of the unknown unknowns by like having a diverse team, having a team of people that are young and old, and that come from like upper middle class white America and don't. You want to have like a whole population of people so that, you know, as you're confronted with challenges, as you need to overcome or accomplish something, you have a variety of perspectives contributing to how you accomplish this thing, right? And all of these things contribute to your potential success, especially because success is pretty much just like the absence of failure. So as long as you don't fail, you're succeeding. Like there's kind of sucks. There's not like a moment where you're handed a trophy in real life, especially if you're building a business, a company, a project, a product. Like there's not an end where you're like, sweet, we did it. It keeps going. It keeps going. It's always incomplete. And so in that state of, you know, incompleteness, all you have to do is not fail in order to quote unquote succeed. And one of the things that will prevent your failure is not being caught off guard with the unknown unknowns, et cetera, et cetera. Sorry. And as always, with everything that we talked about, right? Like all the words I've talked about, balance is the key. You don't want to be too optimistic. You don't want to be too idealistic. You don't want to have your idealism and your optimism and your whatever that trait is that has you like walk off a cliff, or has my daughter reach for the hot pan with like no knowledge that touching the hot pan will result in harm. You want to balance that with I guess pessimism, or being in touch with reality, seeking out knowledge, seeking out other perspectives. If you're too far on one end, like nothing will ever be created, right? You'll just sit in the corner and like shake and cry and, you know, have a terrible outlook on life and never even attempt to create anything, because you would just be so certain that it would fail and it's not even worth pursuing. But on the other end, if you're too idealistic, you end up blind to the harm that you may cause, the harm that may come to you, right? And when we have this idealistic goal of making the world better or making people's lives better, one failure state is harming other people, right? That's not succeeding. Like, I'm going to make the world a better place. And then when you're like on your deathbed looking back at your life, you're like, man, I did not make the world a better place. I actually made the world a worse place. Like that's a bad place to be. We don't want to be there. So balance. You want to always be adjusting where you are, always be adjusting where you're going, being on the lookout for, you know, assumptions that you're making that are wrong, and react to those to correct whichever direction you're skewing towards. Because at the end of the day, even if you have the best intentions, right? Even if you want the world to be a better place, even if you have the most just and righteous goals ever, it doesn't mean that you'll actually make the world a better place, right? Like that's not enough. You actually have to ensure that your actions, the things that you do, the impact of your actions, the people that you affect, the things that you affect, the communities that you affect, you have to ensure all of that actually is better and not worse. You have to, because otherwise you can go out and you can want all of the things that you want, and you can be the best person that you can possibly be, and then you can still walk into a mode where you just make the world a better, worse place. And that's not where we want to be. And I think that we will start seeing this more and more. We'll see this with ICO teams due to their lack of constraints. We're going to see this with more and more DeFi projects. We've already seen it with some, but we're going to see it with more. I think everyone deals with it on a certain level. But I do think that because of the particular makeup of this industry and the things that I've been seeing and the people that I've been interacting with and the conversations I've been having, I do suspect that this may be a bigger problem than we expect. You know, in order for DeFi to succeed, in order for your project to succeed, in order for us not to be hacked all day, every day, we have to have knowledge. We can't be blind to the potential harm that we're either causing or creating, or are the harm that's being done to us, right? Like if you're a creator and someone hacks you, like it's harm to your users, it's harm to your reputation, it's harm to your company, to your employees, everything, but it's also harm to you. Like as a person, you will be impacted by that. And obviously we want to avoid harm as much as possible. So to wrap things up, this is sort of how I think about if you're a creator, right? If you're a boss, if you are running a company or trying to run a company, or even just trying to build something that touches anyone in any ways, right? Like if you are a podcaster, or you're a director, or you're a producer, or you're serving coffee to the director, or you're using DeFi, or you're building DeFi, like whatever it is, if you're doing things to create things that will impact the people around you, this is sort of how I've been looking at some huge concepts. So as you grow up and as you become less naive, you realize at some point that harm can come to both yourself and others, right? This is like when my daughter knows that if she touches the hot pan, it will hurt. That knowledge is where like your naivete starts to trickle off. But that doesn't make you self-aware. Just because she knows that, like, don't touch the hot pan, just because she knows that doesn't make her self-aware. To be self-aware, you have to actually start to understand that you and your actions can cause yourself harm and can cause others harm. It's not the pan's fault that it's hot, although that's a totally fine way for a 21-month-old to not touch the pan, right? But if you are a mature adult, you have to grok that, like, you touching the pan is what caused you to be burned. The pan being hot was another factor in the situation, but really you touched the pan. That was you. And then to level up again, when you start leading people, whether that's like literally being a boss or a CEO, or just being a leader in a community, or like really, and there's a lot of ways to lead that don't have a formal title. That's when you start to not only understand that not doing things can cause harm, but also you actually realize that and try to make the best decisions possible with all the knowledge that you have, right? You have the self-awareness, you have this knowledge, now you're trying to make better decisions. And then good leadership, which is what I and most people are trying to achieve, right? I'm trying to achieve that level of being a good leader. It's an all battle. It is not something that will ever be done. I will never probably, I'll never get a trophy for like you did it. You're a good leader now. It's not a title. It's an ongoing battle. And that battle is like when I actually successfully make the best decisions given the circumstances, given everything, right? And it doesn't, once again, it doesn't matter if my intentions are good, right? My intentions do matter. I have to have the good intentions. But at the end of the day, what makes me a good leader is not that I had good intentions, it's that I had good intentions and my actions had good results. They had a positive impact on my company, on my employees, on the people around me, on the people using my product, on the community, whatever it is. And that's a really, it's a weird thing. And we'll get there. We're growing up every single day. I'm growing up, but this ecosystem, this industry is growing up. And I think that we will have struggles, we will have failures, but if we keep bringing knowledge in and bringing our experiences in and sharing our knowledge and sharing our experiences, ultimately, I have no doubt that crypto can succeed, that companies can succeed, that the people in the space can succeed. And we have to do more than just try to succeed. We have to actually pursue and actively strive for that success and actively bring in that knowledge. But if we do that, then we can make the world a better place. And then crypto can actually do the things that we all dream about doing every single day. And so with that, I want to say thank you. I'm Taylor Monahan. I am the CEO of MyCrypto. And any comments, any arguments, I welcome in regards to anything in this talk. Thank you so much.